Hello everybody, I'm Jake, and today we are doing the Planeswalker Party Precon deck tech slash upgrades. Bear with me, we're gonna do this. I think I took out this time about 24 cards, and we're starting with the Commodore Guff, or Commodore Buff, like I like to call him. He's a really good commander. I feel like he's an underrated commander. People don't say he's really good. They say there's better Jeskai decks out there, which I somewhat agree with him, but for Planeswalker wise, I really like him because he does something different. He not only helps you ramp for Planeswalkers, so you can cast those more expensive Planeswalkers a little bit earlier in the game, and he can also get you some card advantage once you have at least 2 or 3 Planeswalkers down, and he can deal damage to your opponents at the same time, which I love effects like that, so this is perfect. Now starting off, we have the Planeswalkers we took out. Gideon Jura, I mean, I don't really see a point to him being in the deck because he's 5 mana, and he goads all your creatures to attack him, so he's kind of dead by the time you get him back, or he can become a 6/6 soldier that's indestructible, right? Or no, you prevent the damage that'll be dealt to him. It's like, yeah, no, there's really no point. I took him out. Next is Jace Mirrormage. I mean, you can kick him, but there's really no point to it. All he does is scry 2, and then you 0 him to draw a card, and he loses loyalty counters equal to the mana cost. Yeah, there's really no card advantage here besides looking through the top 2 cards of your deck. Nahiri Harbinger, now this one was a little tough to take out because it does give you some sort of card advantage, but you then again, you have blue, so you have access to other Jaces out there that can just straight up draw you cards instead of discarding. And searching your library for an artifact or creature and putting it onto the battlefield, there's really no artifacts or creatures that really change the game. So that's why I decided to take this out. Now, Saheeli Sublime Artifice, really isn't an artifact deck, so you don't, yeah, it's nice, but there's really no big creatures out there that you have in your deck that will change the game. Next is Teo. I mean, he enters, you create a wall, and then you and target opponent each draw a card. I guess the choose left or right is kind of cool, but then again, no, there's just better things out there than Planeswalkers. And then the Wanderer, prevent all non-combat damage. Like, it's very rare that you'll see like a lightning bolt to a Planeswalker. I mean, most likely the people are going to be swinging at your Planeswalkers, and obviously the Eternal Wanderer is just a straight up upgrade from this, in my opinion. Now, some Planeswalkers that I put in is Archangel Elspeth. I think this is good because it's 4 mana and it gets you bodies on the board, and it could return some of those creatures that got board wiped that you have that are 3 mana or less. I think this is a good addition. Next is Jace Ingenious Mind Mage. This is good because right off the bat, I know it's 6 mana, but it draws you cards just right off the bat, or it can untap all of those wizards that you tap to cast him, like type things. Like, this is really good. And -9, which you can get really high loyalty counters with this deck because your commander at the end of turn, he keeps putting loyalty counters on Planeswalkers. Next, we have one of my favorite Jaces out there, which is Jace Unraveler of Secrets. It's +1 is scry 1, then draw a card, or you can return a target creature to its owner's hand. And then its emblem, which is really easy to get to, counters the first spell each opponent casts each turn. Like, that's pretty good. They have to start playing around this now, especially when they don't have a lot of cards in their hand. There's really nothing they can do. They're kind of locked out of the game. It's pretty tough to play against, but it's a great card. Moving on, we have Ral Zarek. I like this because you can tap target permanents and untap another target permanent. So if you need that 1/1 wizard, it's pretty good. He's also minus as a lightning bolt, which can be, kind of nice to use in certain situations, but I really have it for the -7. It's kind of fun because you flip 5 coins and you take an extra turn for each one that comes up heads, which the biggest thing with Planeswalkers is taking extra turns. The more turns you take, just the more devastating it becomes for your opponents. Next, we have literally 3 Teferis that I don't know why this deck didn't have any Teferis, but don't worry, we rectified it by putting in 3 of them. First up is Hero of Dominaria. You draw a card, begin your end step, untap 2 lands. This is really good if you have like a Dolphin's V2 or a counterspell in your hand, because then you can keep that up. You don't really have to play around anything. You don't have to hold up your mana. And then it's -8, which is ridiculously good and easy to get to, is whenever you draw a card, exile target permanent opponent controls. Oh my god. Literally off an Ugin, which is in the deck. I put it in. I don't know why I've been putting Ugin in all my decks recently, but I put it in. His ultimate is draw 7 cards. So if you have Teferi's ultimate and then you ultimate Ugin, you're exiling 7 things. Plus putting 7 things down. It's a ridiculous amount of value that you can easily get to. Obviously, Teferi Master of Time, this should go in any Planeswalker deck. This can go in any blue deck. You can activate it on your opponent's turns, and if you need some kind of utility, he can phase out a creature that's attacking you or one of your Planeswalkers. So if somebody swings their commander and you really want to save him, you can phase him out. But the most important thing about Teferi Master of Time is take 2 extra turns after this one. That is ridiculous for -10. By the time you get him back to your turn, he'll at least have 7 loyalty counters, plus your commander 8. And then if you have anything that can make you activate him again or anything like that, he will go off again. It's ridiculous. It's such a good card. Now moving on to the last Teferi that we have, it's Teferi Temporal Archmage. Now I think this is one of the most important planeswalkers in this deck because not only does it give you value as it's +1, it's a -1, can untap all those wizards your commanders make to cast another planeswalker. That's not even the best ability. The -10 gives you an emblem that can activate loyalty abilities of planeswalkers you control on any player's turn. This means instead of your planeswalkers going off only on your turn, they're going off on each opponent's turn. Now moving on to the creatures we took out. Cartographer's Hawk, Mangara the Diplomat, Narset Enlightened Master. You don't really need Cartographer's Hawk because like when it ETBs, you get lands. But there's 35 lands in this deck and there's a bunch of mana rocks. Now Mangara, I know this gives you good card advantage and it gives you lifelink if you need it in a time of need. There's just planeswalkers that give you so much card advantage that I just decided to take them out because I'd rather have that slot for a planeswalker, to be honest. Narset Enlightened Master, I mean, she's a great CEDH commander, but this is casual. It's a slower format. You're really not going to be getting her off. She costs 6 mana. She's just a little too slow for what we're doing here. Now, Resco's Explorer is the same deal with Cartographer's Hawk. There's so many lands and you're drawing a lot of cards. You don't need this. Now, Silent Arbiter and Wall of Denial. I can understand these two because Silent Arbiter can really protect your planeswalkers because it only lets one or more creatures can attack. But then again, I have a bunch of planeswalkers that put bodies on the battlefield, so I don't really need it. So we took out 6 creatures and we only put 2 in. One of them is Lysel, Vlaakith's Champion. This is a fantastic card in this deck. I don't know why it wasn't in the Precon. It is fantastic. Every time you put a counter on a planeswalker just by activating ability or your commander's ability at the end of turn, you put another one. This will help you ultimate so much faster. And then we move on to Mila Crafty Companion, which whenever somebody attacks one of your planeswalkers, you put a loyalty counter on each planeswalker you control, which will de-incentivize your opponents from kind of attacking you because then all your planeswalkers are getting bigger, so they're just going to be farther away from killing them. Now moving on to a pretty important thing, enchantments. The only enchantment I took out is Oath of Jace because there's just so many other cards out there that give you that value. The enchantments I put in are All Will Be One, which is really important because whenever you put one or more counters on a permanent or player, you can deal that much damage to an opponent, a creature, or a planeswalker an opponent controls. And then we went on with Elspeth Conquers Death. This is a really good one because it can exile something. It can kind of stacks your opponents for a turn, and it can return a planeswalker from your graveyard to the battlefield. Inexorable Tide is just an amazing card to have. Every time you cast something, you proliferate. It could be a Soul Ring, it could be another planeswalker. Teferi's Talent, I think, is also one of the best cards in this deck because it's kind of like the other Teferi Temporal Archmage. It gives you that ability to activate your planeswalker's abilities on every single turn. Now, the last enchantment I put in, it's not exactly budget, but it's Smothering Tithe. This is just such a good card. This is any white tech, you got to put this card in because it's so good. It's so taxing on your opponents. It gives you the mana to have those splashy turns. If it's out of your budget, I would try something like a Smuggler's Share. It's not exactly as stacksy, but it does generate you value over time. Now, the last few cards I took out include all the Signets, Nivenral's Disc, and Norn's Annex. Now, the Signets you don't really need because this deck has 35 lands, and it already has the Talismans, and there's a Planeswalker that gives you mana, so there's no need for it. Nivenral's Disc, I just put some better removal in there, so you don't really need this. Norn's Annex is basically useless in this deck because it's 5 mana, probably going to cost you 3 and 4 life to cast, when Onaki Oathkeeper is just way better for 2 mana. And now the most important addition to this deck is Ichor Moon Gauntlet. This gives your Planeswalkers the ability to proliferate and take extra turns themselves, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you can put a counter on any planeswalker you like. This also goes nicely with Staff of Completion. Now, I put this in here because it's really good utility, but you have to pay some life, so maybe you need 1 colored mana to cast that planeswalker, you have it here. Or maybe if you need to get 1 extra loyalty counter, you can proliferate, and or if you even need to draw a card, it's there. The only thing is I would hesitate to use this because you will be paying a lot of life. You can't tempt yourself into doing that, but it's really good if you need it for last gasp play. Now, the final thing I took out is just 2 plains and a mountain. It had 38 lands. You don't need that many. I think 35 is just fine. If you want to upgrade the mana base yourself, you can do that to make color fixing a little bit better for you. But other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next video.